Hi, I am Savaya, lecturer in physics, working in Vignan institutions. In the today's session, I am going to explain IIT JEE paper held on 2nd September 2020 in shift 2. That is the first day of the September session of IIT JEE exams. Now, see the problems one by one. This is problem number 1. The figure shows a region of length L with a uniform magnetic field of 0.3 Tesla in it and a proton entering the region with velocity 4 into 10 to the power of 5 meter per second, making an angle 60 degrees with the field. If the proton completes 10 revolutions by the time it crosses the region shown, L is close to dash. Here, the strength of the field is given, the velocity of the particle is given, and the angle made by the particle with the field is given, and the number of the revolutions is given, mass of the proton and the charge of the proton are given. Now, we want to determine the number of the rotations the particle completes before it leaves the region. This is the question. Now, come to the basics of the motion of the particle in the magnetic field. If suppose this is the magnetic field, a particle enter into the magnetic field with some velocity v by making an angle theta with the direction of the field. This velocity can be resolved into two components. One is v cos theta parallel to the direction of the field and v sin theta perpendicular to the direction of the field. Now, due to this component v sin theta, the body or the particle describes the circular path, whereas this v cos theta advances the particle in the forward direction. As a result of that, the particle will be following the helical structure like this. The particle will be following the helical structure like this. Now, for this helical structure, the time period of the rotation is given by t is equal to 2 pi m divided by qb. Here, m is the mass of the particle, q is the charge of the particle, and b is the strength of the magnetic field. And the particle completes rotation in the helical structure. The distance advanced by the particle for one rotation is defined as the pitch of the rotation, and that pitch of the rotation is given by x is equal to v cos theta into t. Now, this is the formula for the time period of the rotation. This is the formula for the pitch of the rotation, that is the distance advanced by the particle for one rotation. Whereas here in this problem it is given that the particle completes 10 revolutions as it passes through the given magnetic field. That's why in this problem the length of the magnetic field is given by 10 times the pitch of the rotation. That's why we can write L is equal to 10x. Now, in these equations all quantities are given. We want to determine the length of the region where the magnetic field exists. For that, see the data. B is equal to 0.3 Tesla, V is equal to 4 into 10 to the power of 5 meter per second, the angle theta is equal to 60 degrees, the number of the rotations n is equal to 10, mass is given, charge is given. Now, let us substitute that values in this equation. It becomes 10 V cos theta into t, that is equal to 10 v cos theta into 2 pi m by qb, that is equal to 10 into 4 into 10 to the power of 5 into cos 60 is equal to 1 by 2 into 2 into 3.14 into the mass of the particle is equal to 1.67 into 10 to the power of minus 27 divided by the charge of the proton is equal to 1.6 into 10 power minus 19 into B is equal to 0.3. So by making mathematical simplifications, we get it as L is equal to 0.439 meters. So the answer is 0.44 meters. Okay, here two important concepts are involved. Whenever the particle enters into the magnetic field by making some angle, then the component parallel to the magnetic field advances the particle in the forward direction. The component of the velocity perpendicular to the magnetic field rotates the particle in the circular path. Because of that, the particle follows the helical structure. Okay, now come to the next problem. The displacement time graph of a particle executing SHM is given in the figure. Which of the following statements is or true for this motion? Here, the motion of the simple harmonic is explained by means of a graph in this diagram. From this graph, four options are given. In that four options, which option is right, which option is wrong, that is to be identified. Here, at time t is equal to 0, the displacement of the particle is maximum, so that the particle executes the simple harmonic motion by starting at the extreme position. Let us assume that this is the extreme position, this is the mean position, and this is the extreme position. At time t is equal to 0, this is the position of the particle. Now, at time t is equal to t by 4, the displacement is 0, that means the particle is at mean position. Again, at 2t by 4, 2t by 4 means t by 2, at the t by 2, the displacement is negative maximum, so that the particle is at second extreme position. Again, at 3t by 4, the displacement is 0, so that it is at mean position, and at time t is equal to the time period, the displacement is maximum, that means the particle comes back to the extreme position. So this is the motion of the particle executed in simple harmonic motion. Here, using the displacement time graph, I represent the position of the particle at different times of the motion. Already we know that the force is 0 at mean position, the acceleration is also 0 at mean position, and the velocity is maximum at the mean position. Whereas the force is maximum and the acceleration is also maximum, and the velocity is equal to 0 at the extreme position of the simple harmonic motion. These are known for us, which are the fundamentals of the simple harmonic motion. Now using these, let us check the given conditions one after the another. The force is 0 at t is equal to 3t by 4. See, at 3 is equal to 3t by 4, the particle is at the mean position. At mean position, the force is equal to 0, so that the first statement is right. Now come to the second one. The acceleration is maximum at t is equal to t. So here already we know that when the time t is equal to the time period of the harmonic motion, the particle is at extreme position. At extreme position, we know that the acceleration of the particle is maximum, so that B is also right. The speed is maximum at t is equal to t by 4. See, at time t is equal to t by 4, the particle is at the mean position. At mean position, the velocity of the particle is maximum. That's why C is also right. The potential energy is equal to the kinetic energy at t is equal to t by 2. So at t is equal to t by 2, the particle is at the extreme position. At this extreme position, the velocity of the particle is minimum, which is equal to 0, so that the kinetic energy is also equal to 0. That's why when the time is equal to half of the time period, the kinetic energy is not equal to the potential energy. That's why the statement D is wrong. So in the given 4 statements, the statements A, B, C are right and D is wrong, so that your answer is 4. Now come to the next problem. A wire carrying current I is bent in the shape ABCDEFA as shown in the figure, where rectangle ABCDA and ADEFA are perpendicular to each other. If sides of the rectangle are of lengths A and B, then the magnitude and the direction of the magnetic moment of the loop ABCDEFA is dash. Here for this loop, one side is given as A, one side is given as B. Now here the given loop is held like this. The 2 planes are perpendicular to one another. Now current is passing through the coil. For that coil we want to determine the magnetic moment value. Already we know the formula for the magnetic moment value. The magnetic moment M is equal to NIA. Here N is the number of the turns, I is the current passing through the coil, and A is the area of the given coil. Here for the coil there is only one turn, that's why this N is equal to 1. Here A is the area of the coil. For this ABCDA coil, length is equal to A and the breadth is equal to B, so that the area of the coil A is equal to AB. For this FADEFA also, the dimensions are same, that's why for that also the area is same. Now using this we can determine the magnetic moment value. That too we know that movement is a vector quantity, that's why we have to find out the direction of the movement also by following the proper rules. First come to the ABCDA loop. For ABCDA loop, the magnetic moment is given by M1 is equal to N is equal to 1, I, the area of the coil is equal to AB. This is the magnitude of the magnetic moment. What is the direction? Now let us take your right hand, keep the thumb finger in the direction of the current, then the folding fingers gives the direction of the magnetic moment. In this case, if you keep the finger in the direction of the current, then the folding fingers gives the direction of the magnetic field anywhere of the coil, so that the direction of the magnetic moment is perpendicular to the plane of the coil. Here the plane of the coil is in the XY plane, so that the magnetic moment is in the Z-axis direction, along which the unit vector is given by k cap. That's why the direction of the magnetic moment of the ABCDA loop is given by M1 bar is equal to IAB k cap. Here this IAB is the magnitude, k cap is the direction of the magnetic moment. Similarly, come to the second one, that is ADEFA loop. For ADEFA loop, the magnetic moment is given by M2, that is equal to IAB. What about its direction? Here, see, the current is flowing in the downward direction like this. That's why the direction of the magnetic moment is coming out of the board. That means it is perpendicular to the plane containing this part of the coil. You know that this part is in the XZ plane. That's why the magnetic moment value is along the y-axis direction like this. And that's why the vector form of the magnetic moment is given by M2 bar is equal to IAB J cap. Okay, so by using the proper rules we have to find out the magnetic moment direction. If there is any mistake in the identifying of the direction of the magnetic moment, then while adding the magnetic vectorically you will get wrong results. That's why what is the magnitude of the magnetic moment, what is the direction of the magnetic moment, they have to be identified exactly. Now here we know M1 value and M2 value in their vector form. Now the total moment of the coil is given by M is equal to M1 bar plus M2 bar. this is equal to IAB K cap plus IAB J cap. But in the answers, in all brackets, we have something in the denominator part. That's why take root 2 IAB as common. It becomes root 2 IAB into J by root 2 plus K by root 2. So this is the actual answer, but to get the answer in the form of the given options, so root 2 IAB is taken as common and we have this value for the magnetic moment. Now let us see what is the right option. So the right option is 1. Okay. Come to the next problem. A potentiometer wire PQ of 1 meter length is connected to a standard cell E1. Another cell E2 of EMF 1.02 volts is connected with a resistance smaller on switch S. With S open, the null position is obtained at a distance of 49 cm from Q. The potential gradient in the potentiometer wire is dash. Here, under the balancing conditions, the balancing position or the null position is obtained at a distance of 49 cm from Q. That means from here to here the distance is given as 49 centimeters. So actually the balancing length means the distance of the null point from the left end. This is the balancing length. To confuse you, instead of giving this balancing length value, this length is given as 49 centimeters. Here the total length of the wire is given as 1 meter. That's why if this is 49 centimeters, then this balancing length is equal to 51 centimeters. Now already we know that whenever the potentiometer is balanced, then no current is passing through the galvanometer. That's why whether the resistance is connected in series or even the resistance is shorted by means of the switch, there is no difference in the balancing condition. That's why under the balancing conditions we can write the EMF of the cell connected in the secondary circuit is equal to potential gradient times the balancing length of the potentiometer wire. Here E2 is given, balancing length is given. We want to determine the potential gradient value. That potential gradient phi is equal to E2 by L. Here E2 is given as 1.02 volts. Divided by the length is given in centimeters, just substitute in centimeters, it becomes 51 centimeters. So this is equal to 0.02 volt per centimeters. If suppose the options are given in meters, then change the L value into the meters, then you will get the potential gradient value in volt per meter. Okay, here the potential gradient is 0.02 volt per centimeter, so that your answer is 1. This is the right answer. Come to the next problem. In a Young's double slit experiment, 16 fringes are observed in a certain segment of screen when light of wavelength 700 nanometers is used. If the wavelength of the light is changed to 400 nanometers, the number of the fringes observed in the same segment of the screen would be dash. So to solve that problem, let us see the experimental setup of the Young's double slit experiment. So these are the two slits S1, S2, which are separated by a distance d, and this is the screen. Let d is the distance between the screen and the slits. Now let us consider this point and let L is the length of the segment taken on the screen. We know that in the Young's double slit experiment, alternate dark bright bands are formed, and for these bands the fringe width is given by beta is equal to lambda d divided by d. Let us assume that there are n fringes in the given segment of length L. We know that for each fringe, the width is equal to beta. There are n fringes, so that the length of the segment is given by L is equal to n beta. So which can be written as L is equal to n times lambda d divided by d. In this setup, d is constant, small d is also constant. Why? Because the two depends only on the experimental setup value. As lambda changes, n also changes to keep the length of the segment as common. It is given that in the first case and in the second case, they consider the segment of same length. In the two cases, two different wavelengths are given and number of the fringes is to be compared. What are given? Here, the number of the fringes in the first case, n1 is equal to 16, and the wavelength in the first case is given by lambda 1 is equal to 700 nanometers. In the second case, lambda 2 is equal to 400 nanometers, and we want to determine the number of the fringes or the number of the bands in the segment of same length. That's why L is same, D is same, this D is also same, so that we can write n lambda is equal to constant. From that we can write n1 lambda 1 is equal to n2 lambda 2. From this we can write n2 is equal to n1 lambda 1 divided by lambda 2. This is equal to 16 into 700 divided by 400. By solving this, you will get it as 28. So the number of the bands when we use the light of wavelength 400 nanometers is 28. So your answer is 1. Come to the next problem. A heat engine is evolved with exchange of the heat of 1915 joules, minus 40 joules, plus 125 joules and Q joules. During one cycle, achieving an efficiency of 50%, the value of Q is dash. Here, already we know the things going on in a heat engine in one cyclic process. So, the heat energy taken by the gas in the first step is given by 1915 joules. Whereas, in the second process, the heat is given by minus 40 joules. That means it loses the heat energy to the surroundings. And in the third process, the heat is given by Q3 is equal to 125 joules. And in the fourth process, Q4 is equal to Q joules. We know that in the heat engine process, in one process heat takes, in the second process heat loses, in the third process again it takes heat, and in the fourth process it loses heat. So that we can take this Q4 as minus Q. During one cycle, achieving an efficiency of 50%. 50%, this is equal to 1 by 2. Then the value of Q is dash. Already we know that the efficiency is equal to the total amount of the work done divided by the amount of the heat energy taken from the source. But here work is not given. We want to determine the Q value by using the efficiency value. From the first law of the thermodynamics, we know that dQ is equal to du plus dW. Already we know that during one cycle, the change in the internal energy is equal to 0. That's why du is equal to 0. From that we can write dQ is equal to dW. Therefore, dW is given by dW is equal to 1915 minus 40 plus 125 minus Q. This is equal to 2000 minus Q. Now, the amount of the heat energy taken from the source is given by Q is equal to, this is the heat taken from the source, this is also heat taken from the source, but these two are the heat rejected to the sink. That's why we should not take a Q2 and Q4 while calculating the heat energy taken by the heat engine. So Q is equal to 1915 plus 125, this is equal to 2040 joules. Now we know dW value and also we know Q value. By the definition, the efficiency eta is equal to the work done divided by the amount of the heat energy taken. From this we can write 1 by 2 is equal to 2000 minus Q divided by 2040. Now let us cross multiply the terms and simplify the equation for the unknown Q value. After simplification you will get Q is equal to 980 joules. So your answer is 3. Come to the next problem. In a hydrogen atom, the electron makes a transition from n plus 1th level to the nth level. If n is very greater than 1, the frequency of the radiation emitted is proportional to dash. Now let us see the levels. Let it be the nth level, let it be the n plus 1th level. Let E1 and E2 are the energies of the two levels. Suppose an electron is making transition from the n plus 1th level to the nth level. From n plus 1th level to the nth level, then you know that the electron loses some energy. The loss of energy is liberated in the form of the photons. The energy of the photon is given by the formula E is equal to h nu, that is equal to the energy of the higher orbit or higher level minus the energy of the lower level. Already we know that the energy of a particular energy level is given by E is equal to minus 13.6 divided by n square electron volts. Now using that formula, find out E1 value, E2 value and make simplification for unknown frequency nu. So this is given by h nu is equal to, what is E2? That is the n plus 1th level, that's why E2 is equal to minus 13.6 divided by n plus 1 whole square. Minus of minus a plus 13.6 divided by n square. Now by taking 13.6 as common, it becomes 13.6 times 1 by n square minus 1 by n plus 1 square. Now by taking LCM we have 13.6 times n plus 1 square minus n square divided by n square into n plus 1 square. So by expanding this n plus 1 whole square and making simplification, we get it as h nu is equal to 2n plus 1 divided by n square into n plus 1 whole square. But in the problem it is given that the number of the energy level n is very greater than 1. If n is very greater than 1, then n plus 1 is nearly equal to n and 2n plus 1 is nearly equal to 2n. Now substitute these two conditions in that equation, it becomes 2n divided by n square into n square. Okay, so n cancels and from this we have nu is proportional to 1 by n cube. By eliminating the constants, if you write down the proportionality, it becomes nu is proportional to 1 by n cube. So your answer is 2. Come to the next problem. In the following digital circuit, what will be the output at Z when the input A, B are given 4 combinations? Okay. Now, this is the digital circuit which contains one NAND gate, one OR gate, one AND gate and one NOR gate. To find out the output of the logical gate, first of all we have to know the logical expression of the output in terms of the inputs. For that I am going to use some Boolean algebraical expressions. They are A plus B bar is equal to A bar dot B bar, A dot B bar is equal to A bar plus B bar, and 1 plus A is equal to A double bar is equal to A. These are the Boolean expressions. In these expressions, the plus stands for OR operation and the dot stands for AND operation, whereas the bar stands for NOT operation. Now, let us identify the outputs at the different stages of the circuit. So, at C, the output is, this is the NAND gate, one input is A and the other input is B, so that C is equal to A dot B bar. Next, D is the OR gate, at D the output is A plus B. At E, one input is C, one input is D, whereas this is the AND gate, that's why the logical expression at E is C dot D, whereas at Z, one input is C, one input is E, this is the NOR gate, that's why the output Z is given by C plus E bar. So we have to find out the logical expression Z in terms of AB. For that, substitute this C value in this equation, it becomes Z is equal to A dot B bar plus so substitute the E value in this equation, it becomes Z is equal to C plus E is equal to C dot D bar. This is equal to, by taking C as common, it becomes C of 1 plus D bar. We know that 1 plus A is equal to A, that's why 1 plus D is nothing but D, that's why we can write it as Z is equal to C bar. We know that C is equal to A dot B bar, that's why C bar is equal to A dot B bar bar, this is equal to A dot B. That's why if you see the logical expression of the output Z, the logical expression is Z is equal to A dot B. Already we know the truth table of the AND gate for different combinations. The output of the AND gate is 1 only when the two inputs are 1. That's why using this truth table for the given 4 combinations, we can identify the outputs. When only during the third option the two inputs are 1, that's why the output is 1. For the first combination, for second combination, and for fourth combination, either 1 or 2 inputs are 0. In that case, the output is 0. That's why for the given 4 combinations, the outputs are 0, 0, 1, 0. So answer 3 is the right. Okay. So whenever a circuit is given to you, in that circuit, first identify the given gates. So recall the logical expression of that gates. So using the Boolean algebra, simplify the circuit for getting the simple expression for the output in terms of the inputs. After that, for the different combinations of the input, what is the output, identify that and let us choose the right answer in case of the logical circuits. Okay, come to the next one. If momentum P, area A and time T are taken to be the fundamental quantities, then the dimensional formula for energy is dash. Actually, mass, length, time are taken as the fundamental quantities and we express the dimensional formulas for any physical quantities in terms of m, l, t. But in this problem, momentum P, area A and time T are taken as the fundamental quantities and we want to find out the dimensional formula for energy in terms of that P, A, T. For that, let us assume that the dimensional formula of energy E is proportional to the P to the power of X, A to the power of Y and T to the power of Z. Here P, A, T are the quantities which are to be taken as the fundamental quantities. For that we assume the unknown powers X, Y, Z. If we calculate the X, Y, Z values, then we can express the dimensional formula of energy in terms of the given fundamental physical quantities. For that, we should know the dimensional formulas of each and every term involved in the problem. We know the dimensional formula of energy, that is m1 L2 T minus 2. This is proportional to, for momentum, the dimensional formula is m1 L1 T minus 1 power x, and for area the dimensional formula is L2, so to the power of y, and for the time the dimensional formula is T1 to the power of c. So in the next step, separate the bases in the right hand side of the expression, then it becomes m to the power of x, L to the power of x plus 2y and t to the power of minus x plus z. Okay, so m1 L2 t minus 2 is proportional to m to the power of x, L to the power of x plus 2y, t to the power of minus x plus z. According to the principle of the homogeneity, two terms can be added or two terms can be subtracted only when they have the same units, same dimensions. Similarly, according to the principle of the homogeneity, the left hand side of the equation and the right hand side of the equation must be having the same units and the same dimensions. So using that principle of the homogeneity, I am going to equate the powers of the similar bases on the left hand side and the right hand side. By comparing, we have x is equal to 1, x plus 2y is equal to 2 and minus x plus z is equal to minus 2. By substituting x value in this equation, we have y is equal to 1 by 2, and by substituting x value in this equation, we have z is equal to minus 1. So by substituting x value, y value, z value, we have the dimensional formula of energy is P a power 1 by 2 t power minus 1, right? So your answer is 2. Come to the next problem. A capillary tube made of glass of radius 0.15 millimeter is dipped vertically in a beaker filled with methylene iodide, whose surface tension value is given. The density is also given, which rises to a height h in the tube. It is observed that the two tangents drawn from the liquid glass interfaces from the opposite sides of the capillary make an angle of 60 degrees with one another. Then h is close to dash. Now let us see the arrangement used for the studying of the capillary rise. This is the liquid raised in the capillary tube. Now these are the two tangents drawn at the interface of the glass liquid interface. Now in this problem, this angle is given as 60 degrees. This angle is given as 60 degrees, and if we write down the other data, the given data is r is equal to 0.15 millimeter, that is equal to 15 into 10 to the power of 5 meters. G is given as 10 meter per second square, and the surface tension of the liquid is given 0.05 Newton per meter, and the density of the liquid is given as 6.667 kg per meter cube. Now we want to determine the capillary rise h value. What is the formula for the capillary rise? We know that the capillary rise h is equal to 2t cos theta divided by r dg. 2t cos theta divided by r dg. T is given, r is given, d is given, g is given, but theta is given in the confucius way. This angle is given as 60 degrees, but in this equation, this theta stands for the angle of the contact, which is nothing but the angle made by the tangent to the liquid surface with the solid surface at the point of contact inside the liquid, so that by the definition this is the theta value, but without giving this theta value, this angle is given. Now using this angle, if you determine this angle is obtained as 30 degrees from the geometry. So by substituting theta is equal to 30 degrees in this equation, we have h is equal to 2. What is it? 0.05 cos 30 divided by 15 into 10 to the power of minus 5 into density is equal to 667 into 10. Okay, so by substituting cos 30 is equal to root 3 by 2, and by making mathematical simplifications, we get it as 0.087 meters. So your answer is 3. Here in this equation, this theta is the angle of the contact. Without giving the angle of the contact, this theta value is given to confuse you in the examination. So using that angle, we have to identify the angle of the contact value, then we can solve the problem for getting the capillary rise. Come to the next problem. The height h at which the weight of a body will be the same as that at the same depth h from the surface of the earth is dash. Here, suppose this is the surface of the earth. Let us consider 2 points A and B. This point A is at a height h from the surface. The point B is at the same depth h from the surface. That means points A and B are at equidistant from the surface of the earth. One is above the earth, other is below the earth. It is also given that the weight of the body will be same at the two positions. Weight of the body means W is equal to mg. If weight of the body is same, then the acceleration due to gravity value is also same. That means in the problem, the height is equal to depth is given, and the acceleration due to gravity at these two places are also equal, that is also given. Now by finding the g dash value, g double dash value, by equating the two values, we have to find out the h value. If suppose g is the acceleration due to gravity on the surface, capital G is the Newton's universal gravitational constant and m is the mass of the earth, then the acceleration due to gravity at a depth at a height h is given by g dash is equal to gm by r plus h whole square. G is the Newton's universal gravitational constant, m is the mass of the earth and r is the radius of the earth. H is the height of the given point. Let it be equation number 1. Similarly, at a depth h from the surface, the acceleration due to gravity is given by g double dash is equal to gm by r cube into r minus h. Let it be equation number 2. Now, in this problem, it is given that at a height h and at depth h, the acceleration due to gravity is same. That's why we have to equate this g dash value and g double dash value. By equating g dash value and g double dash value, we have gm by r plus h whole square is equal to gm by r cube into r minus h. So here gm cancels, and by making the cross multiplication, we have r cube is equal to r plus h whole square into r minus h. By expanding this bracket, by multiplying this bracket with this bracket, and by taking this r cube to that side, after making the mathematical simplification, we have r square minus rh minus h square is equal to 0, which is a quadratic equation. From that quadratic equation, find out the roots. By finding the roots, we can determine the unknown h value. The h value is found to be root 5r minus r divided by 2. So your answer is 1. So it involves some mathematical calculations. So you have to simplify this one. After that, you have to find out the roots of this equation. Then we can find out the h value. Right? Come to the next problem. An ideal gas in a closed container is slowly heated. As its temperature increases, which of the following statements are true? So 4 statements are given for us. In that 4 statements, which statement is right if the temperature is raised for the given gas in a container? Now let us take the container which contains gas molecules. We know that the gas molecules are continuously moving due to the thermal energies, and they are making collisions with the walls of the container and also with the other molecules. So they are moving in the zigzag path like this, and during that zigzag path they are traveling certain mean distance between the 2 successive collisions. That average distance travelled by the molecule between the 2 successive collisions is defined as the mean free path, and the time taken between the 2 successive collisions is defined as the mean collision time. Here the 4 options are given in terms of the mean free path and mean collision time, so that the mean free path is given by the formula lambda is equal to v divided by root 2 pi d square n. In this equation, v stands for the volume of the container and n stands for the total number of the molecules of the gas in the container. So this mean free path is independent on the temperature. That's why even though the temperature is rising slowly, the mean free path does not change. So that the mean free path decreases is the wrong statement, and the mean free path remains unchanged is the right statement. That too, already we know that the RMS velocities of the gas molecules is directly proportional to the absolute temperature of the gas. If the temperature increases, the RMS velocity also increases. In terms of the mean free path and RMS velocity of the gas molecules, the mean collision time is given by time is equal to distance by velocity, that is lambda divided by VRMS. As the temperature increases, the RMS velocities of the gas molecules increases. Whenever this RMS velocity increases, the mean collision time decreases. That's why the mean collision time remains unchanged is the wrong statement, and the mean collision time between the molecules decreases is the right statement. So BC are right statements and AD are the wrong statements. So your answer is 4. Now come to the next problem. A charge Q is distributed over two concentric conducting thin spherical shells of radii small r and capital R. Here capital R is given as very greater than small r. If the surface charge densities on the two spheres are equal, the electric potential at the common center is dash. So here two concentric spherical shells are given to you. Here small r is the radius of the inner shell and capital R is the radius of the outer shell, and for that combination a total charge Q is given. Now let us assume that the total charge is distributed like this. Q1 is the amount of the charge on the inner shell and Q2 is the charge on the outer spherical shell. But it is given that the surface charge densities are same. So the surface charge densities are same. That means the surface charge density of the inner shell is equal to the surface charge density of the outer shell. What is meant by the surface charge density? The surface charge density is defined as the charge distributed per 1 unit area. That's why by knowing the total charge present and the total area of the surface, the charge density can be determined by the formula charge by area. Using this concept, when you finding the surface charge density for the inner shell, it becomes Q1 by 4 pi r square is equal to the surface charge density for the outer shell is Q2 divided by 4 pi r square. Here 4 pi gets cancelled and we have Q1 is equal to r square by r square into Q2. Now we have one equation in terms of Q1 and Q2. But it is given that the total charge Q is distributed on the two shells as Q1 and Q2. That's why the total charge Q is equal to Q1 plus Q2. Let it be equation number 2. Now by substituting Q1 value in this equation, we get the Q2 value. By knowing Q2 value, we can determine the Q1 value, and the two values are found to be Q1 is equal to Q r square divided by r square plus r square, and Q2 is equal to Q capital R square divided by r square plus r square. So here by equating the surface charge densities, I obtain the amount of the charge present on the inner shell and also the amount of the charge present on the outer shell. We want to determine the potential at the common center of the two spherical shells. Already we know the concept for the potential of the spherical shell inside it. If suppose Q is the charge present and R is the radius of the shell, the potential at any point inside the sphere is given by V in is equal to Q by 4 pi epsilon naught R. Now using this equation, we can determine the potential at point O due to the inner shell and also due to the outer shell, so that the total potential is given by the potential due to the inner shell plus the potential due to the outer shell. This is equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught times Q1 divided by small r plus 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught times Q2 divided by capital R. Now substitute Q1 value, Q2 value, then we get it as V is equal to, I am taking 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught as common, 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught Q R square by R square plus R square into R plus Q R square by R square plus R square into capital R. This square R cancelled, this square and this R are also cancelled, and the equation becomes V is equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught times Q small r plus capital R divided by R square plus R square. So this is your final answer for the potential. When you see the previous options, so the answer 3 is the right answer. Okay? Come to the next problem. An inductance coil has a reactance of 100 ohms. When an AC signal of frequency 1000 Hz is applied to the coil, the applied voltage leads the current by 45 degrees. The self-inductance of the coil is dash. Actually, if the term impedance is used instead of the reactance, the problem is more meaningful. Here, a coil is given. For that coil, let us assume that L is the self-inductance value and R is the internal resistance of the coil. For this coil, an alternating voltage source is connected like this. Whenever the alternating voltage source is connected, current is passing through the circuit. In this problem, it is given that the current passing through the circuit and the applied voltage are out of phase. It is given that the applied voltage leads the current by 45 degrees. So already we know that the tan of the phase difference between the voltage and the current is given by the reactance divided by the resistance of the circuit. Here the inductive reactance is XL and the resistance of the coil is R. So the reactance by the resistance will give you the tan of the phase difference between the voltage and the current. Here the phase difference is given as 45 degrees. We know that tan 45 is equal to 1. So that this is equal to 1 is equal to XL by R. From this we can write the inductive reactance XL is equal to R. Next, here the impedance of the coil is 100 ohms. So impedance Z is equal to 100 ohms. If suppose XL is the reactance value and R is the resistance of the coil, the impedance of the coil is given by root of R square plus XL square. This is given as 100 ohms. Now by substituting XL is equal to R in this equation, we have root 2 XL square is equal to 100. From this we can write XL is equal to 100 by root 2, that is equal to 50 root 2 ohms. Okay, this is the inductive reactance value. But already we know that the inductive reactance XL is equal to 2 pi FL. So 2 pi FL is equal to 50 root 2. We want to find out L value, that L is equal to 50 root 2 divided by 2 pi F. This is equal to 50 root 2 divided by 2 into 3.14 into the frequency is given as 1000 Hz. Now by making the mathematical simplification, we get it as 1.125 into 10 to the power of minus 2 Henry. So the nearest answer is option 1, that is 1.1 into 10 to the power of minus 2 Henry. If suppose we solve the problem directly by taking this 100 ohms as the reactance, So the problem is meaningful that XL is equal to 100. It means that 2 pi FL is equal to 100. It means that we can directly calculate the L value. But here, instead of using the reactance term, they have to use the impedance of the coil, then the problem is meaningful. Now come to the next problem. Two uniform circular discs are rotating independently in the same direction around their common axis passing through their centers. The moment of inertia and angular velocity of the first disc are 0.1 kg meter square and 10 radians per second respectively, while those for the second one are 0.2 kg meter square and 5 radians per second. That means for the first disc and for the second disc, the moment of inertia values are given and the angular velocities are also given. They are rotating in the same direction. At some instant, they get stuck together and start rotating as a single system about their common axis with some angular speed. The kinetic energy of the combined system is dash. Here, this is the first disc. This is the second disc. They are rotating about their own axis with some angular velocities. After some time, the two discs are stuck together like this and the combined system is rotating with angular velocity omega. For that combined system, we have to determine the kinetic energy. If we want to determine the kinetic energy of the combined system, first we have to calculate the common angular velocity of the system after two discs are connected together. For that, first identify the data. Here I1 is equal to given, omega 1 is given, I2 is given, omega 2 is given. Now to determine the common angular velocity of the system, we are going to use the law of conservation of angular momentum. From law of conservation of angular momentum, we can write total momentum of the system, total angular momentum of the system before combining is equal to total angular momentum of the system after combining. From that we have I1 omega 1 plus I2 omega 2 is equal to I1 omega plus I2 omega. From this, the common angular velocity omega is equal to I1 omega 1 plus I2 omega 2 divided by I1 plus I2. Now substitute I1, I2, omega 1, omega 2 values, it becomes 0.1 into 10 plus 0.2 into 5 divided by 0.1 plus 0.2. This is equal to 20 by 3 radians per second. Now this is the common angular velocity of the system of two discs. Now by knowing the common angular velocity, the total kinetic energy of the system can be determined by the formula total kinetic energy is equal to half I1 plus I2 omega square. So this is equal to half of 0.1 plus 0.2 into 20 by 3 whole square. So by substituting it becomes 20 by 3 joules. Okay. So first we determine the common angular velocity of the system. After that we determine the total kinetic energy of the system. So your answer is option 4. Come to the next problem. A small point mass carrying some positive charge on it is released from the edge of a table. There is a uniform electric field in this region in the horizontal direction. Which of the following options then correctly describes the trajectory of the mass? Okay, 4 graphs are given, and for this motion of the particle, which graph is suitable? That is our question. Say, let it be the table. This is the given point mass. It is carrying some charge, say Q. Now, in this region, electric field is applied along the positive x-axis direction. Already we know that whenever there is a positive charge in the electric field, some force is acting in the direction of the field. That's why the force due to the electric field is also acting in the direction of the field, which is given by the formula Fe is equal to Eq. And also we know that whenever there is a particle, always the gravitational force is acting on the particle in the vertically downward direction. This is mg, which is the weight of the body. So mg is acting vertically downwards. The force due to the electric field is acting in the horizontal direction. This is the time independent force. This is also the time independent force. As a result of that, the resultant force acting on the particle is also a time independent force. That's why F is constant, so that A is also constant, and the body starts from rest. That's why the motion of the particle is described by the fourth graph in the given options. So your option is 4. Come to the next problem. A 10 microfarad capacitor is fully charged to a potential difference of 50 volts. After removing the source voltage, it is connected to an uncharged capacitor in parallel. Now the potential difference across them becomes 20 volts. The capacitance of the second capacitor is dash. See this here. This is the first capacitor. The capacitance of the first capacitor is given as 10 microfarads and it is charged to 50 volts. And there is uncharged capacitor. So uncharged capacitor means the potential across it is equal to 0 and its capacitance is also not given. Now these two are connected in parallel like this. When these two are connected in parallel like this, then what happened? The charge flows from the higher potential capacitor to the lower potential capacitor until they attain a common potential value. So the common potential of the combination is also given. So here what are given? So C1 is given, that is equal to 10 microfarads, and the voltage across it is given, V1 is equal to 50 volts. C2 is not given for us, which is to be determined, and V2 is given as 0. Why? Because the second one is uncharged, and the common potential is also given, which is equal to 20 volts. Now, so we want to determine the capacitance value. So across this combination, the common potential is given by the formula V is equal to the total charge divided by total capacitance value. This is equal to Q1 plus Q2 divided by C1 plus C2. By substituting Q is equal to Vc, we can write it as V is equal to V1 C1 plus V2 C2 divided by C1 plus C2. Now substitute the values in that equation. We have 20 is equal to 50 into C1. Take this C1 value directly in microfarads. 50 into 10 plus 0 divided by 10 plus C2. Cross multiply the terms and make it simplify. Then you will get the unknown capacitance C2 value as C2 is equal to 15 microfarads. So your answer is 2. So the formula for the common potential is V is equal to C1 V1 plus V1 C1 plus V2 C2 divided by C1 plus C2. Sometimes before connecting the two capacitors, they are charged such that this is having a potential V1, this is having a potential V2, and the two are connected by touching the positive plate of the first one to the negative plate of the second one, negative plate of the first one to the positive plate of the second one. In that case, the formula is V is equal to V1 C1 minus V2 C2 divided by C1 plus C2. Now come to the next problem. When the temperature of a metal wire is increased from 0 degrees centigrade to 10 degrees centigrade, from 0 degrees centigrade to 10 degrees centigrade, its length increases by 0.02%. The percentage change in mass density will be close to dash. So here the change in the temperature is given as delta T is equal to 10 minus 0, that is equal to 10 degrees centigrade, and the percentage change in the length, that is equal to delta L by L into 100. This is given as 0.02%, and we want to find out the percentage change in the density value. For that, we know the basics. Alpha is equal to L2 minus L1 by L1 times T2 minus T1. From this we can write L2 minus L1 by L1 into 100 is equal to alpha T2 minus T1 into 100. And also we know that gamma is equal to 3 alpha. So I am going to using these equations in the solving of the problem. Here already we know that the density rho is equal to mass by volume. By taking logarithms on both sides, it becomes log rho is equal to log m minus log v. Now, by differentiating the equation and multiplying with 100, it becomes delta rho by rho into 100 is equal to minus delta v by v into 100. Here, mass of the body is constant. The differentiation of a constant is 0. That's why when you differentiate this term, the differentiation is equal to 0. So that we have delta rho by rho into 100 is equal to minus delta v by v into 100. So we can write it as minus gamma into delta t into 100. But already we know that gamma is equal to 3 alpha, so that we can write it as delta rho by rho into 100 is equal to minus 3 alpha delta t into 100. But alpha T2 minus T1 into 100 is nothing but the percentage change in the length, which is given as 0.02% in this equation, so that this is equal to minus 3 into 0.02, that is equal to minus 0.06%. That's why if the length increases by this much, the volume also increases by certain extent. Because of that, the density decreases by 0.06%. So your answer is 2. Now come to the next problem. In a plane electromagnetic wave, the direction of electric field is given by k bar. So here data is missed. The direction of the electric field and the magnetic field are given by k bar and 2i minus j bar respectively. What is the unit vector along the direction of the propagation of the wave? Here while typing the data, just the data is missed. Here the unit vector in the direction of the electric field is k cap, and the unit vector in the direction of the magnetic field is given as 2i minus 2j cap. We want to find out the unit vector along the direction of the propagation of the wave. Already we know that E bar cross B bar is always parallel to the direction of the propagation of the electromagnetic wave. That's why by taking the cross product of these two, we get the vector parallel to the propagation of the wave. So that the vector in the direction of the propagation, the vector in the direction of the propagation is given by C bar is equal to E bar cross B bar. Here what is E bar? E bar is equal to K cap cross B bar is equal to 2i minus 2j, 2i cap minus 2j cap. By expanding this, it becomes 2 times k bar cross I cap minus 2 times k bar cross j cap. Now we have k cross I cap, k cross j cap. To obtain the result, let us take the three vectors in order along the circle like this: I cap, j cap, k cap. If suppose you take the cross product of any two vectors along this direction, you will get the next as the result. If suppose you take the cross product of any two vectors in the reverse order, you will get the negative vector of the next one. It means if suppose we take I cap cross j cap, this is equal to k cap. Similarly, if suppose we take j bar cross k bar or j cap cross k cap, you will get the next one, that is I cap. If suppose we take k cap cross I cap, you will get it as j cap. If suppose we go in the reverse order, then we get the negative vector. Now using that result here, it becomes k cap cross I cap, that is equal to j cap. That's why this is equal to 2 j cap. Next, k cross j cap. What is this k cross j cap? J cross k cap is equal to I. If suppose we take in the reverse order k cross j cap, then we get minus I bar. K cap cross j bar, we get minus I cap. In this order, we get the next one with the positive sign, whereas in this opposite order, we get the next one with a negative sign, so that this k cross j cap is equal to minus I cap, so that this is plus 2 I cap. Now, this is the vector in the direction of the propagation, but we want to find out the unit vector. Unit vector along the direction of the propagation, and the unit vector can be determined by the formula C cap is equal to C bar divided by modulus of C bar, which is equal to 2 times I cap plus j cap divided by root of 2 square plus 2 square, that is 4 plus 4. So by simplifying that, we get it as 1 by root 2 times I cap plus j cap. So that your answer is 1. Okay. Here, this concept is somewhat important. So direction of the propagation, electric field vector, magnetic field vector are mutually perpendicular to one another by following this rule. And while solving this problem, the cross product of the two unit vectors are also important. Why? Because if you take the results with opposite sign, then you will get the wrong answers in the calculation of the vectors. Now come to the next one. A particle is moving 5 times as fast as an electron. It is moving 5 times as fast as an electron. That means if suppose this is the electron, this is the particle, if v1 is the velocity of the electron, the velocity of the particle is equal to 5 times the velocity of the electron. The ratio of the de Broglie wavelengths of the particle to that of the electron is 1.878 into 10 to the power of minus 4. If suppose the de Broglie wavelengths are lambda 1 and lambda 2, then the ratio of the de Broglie wavelengths of the particle to the electron is given by 1.878 into 10 to the power of minus 4. The mass of the particle is close to dash. We know that the mass of the electron is equal to 9.1 into 10 to the power of minus 31 kg, and we have to determine the mass of the second particle. Already we know the formula for the de Broglie wavelength. The de Broglie wavelength is given by lambda is equal to h by mv. Here m is the mass of the particle and v is the velocity of the particle. By using this equation, we can write lambda 2 divided by lambda 1 is equal to m1 v1 divided by m2 v2. By substituting lambda 2 by lambda 1 value, m1 value, v1, v2 values, we can find out m2 value, that is m2 is equal to m1 v1 by v2 into lambda 1 divided by lambda 2. This is equal to, what is m1? Mass of the electron, which is equal to 9.1 into 10 to the power of minus 31 kg into v1 is the velocity of the electron, v1, divided by v2 is equal to 5 v1, and lambda 2 by lambda 1 is equal to this much. From this, lambda 1 by lambda 2 is equal to 1 by 1.878 into 10 to the power of minus 4. When you see this equation, it contains numerical values which are not possible to simplify. But in the examination, we have to simplify in the short span of the time. For that, don't go for the exact values. Just see the powers, 10 to the power of 27, 28, 31, minus 28, like that. Now, identify the solution which is nearest to the given powers of the options. Now, this v1 cancelled, and this is 9.1 into 10 to the power of minus 31 divided by 5 into 1.878. This is nearly equal to 9.3 something into 10 to the power of minus 4. So 9.1 divided by 9.3 must be less than 1, that is nearer to 0.9 something into 10 to the power of minus 27, which is nearly equal to 9 into 10 to the power of minus 28. So the exact answer is 9.7 into 10 to the power of minus 28 kg. So your answer is Your answer is 4. Now come to the next problem. An ideal cell of 10 volts is connected in circuit shown in the figure. Each resistance is 2 ohms. The potential difference in volts across the capacitor when it is fully charged is dash. Here, resistors are there in the circuit. The resistance of each resistor is 2 ohms, and a battery is connected whose voltage is equal to 10 volts. When the capacitor is fully charged, we want to determine the potential difference across the capacitor. For that, let us take these points as A, B, C, D. Now we want to find out the potential drop across the capacitor. Already we know that whenever the capacitor is fully charged, no current is passing through the capacitor in the DC circuits. If no current is passing through the capacitor, then in this ADB branch, no current is passing, so that can be removed from the circuit, and the circuit will be like this. Okay? So here, no current is passing through the capacitor. That's why that ADB part of the circuit is removed. So the circuit becomes like this. Now see, a current I is starting from the battery. This is dividing into I1 and I2. So the same current is passing through these two resistors. That's why these two are in series. That's why 2 plus 2 becomes 4. So that the circuit becomes 4 ohms, 2 ohms, 2 ohms. These 4 ohms and 4 ohms are also in parallel combination, so that the effective resistance is given by 4 into 2 divided by 4 plus 2, that is equal to 4 by 3 ohms. This is 2 ohms. Now, this 4 by 3 ohms and 2 ohms are in the series combination, so that the equivalent resistance of the circuit is given by 4 by 3 plus 2, that is equal to 10 by 3 ohms. By knowing the effective resistance, the current passing through the circuit can be determined by the formula I is equal to V by R, that is equal to 10 by 10 by 3, that is equal to 3 amperes. Okay, so we obtain this current as 3 amperes. Now it is dividing into two branches. This is I1, this is I2, whereas this is I. When the current divides into the two resistors in the parallel combination, the current passing through the first resistance is given by I1 is equal to the total current into opposite branch resistance by the sum of the two resistors. This is equal to 2 amperes. Similarly, if we determine I2 value, this I2 value is equal to 1 ampere. Okay, this I1 is known, I2 is known for us. Now, this is I1, this is I2 in the original circuit. This is I1 plus I2. Now, we want to determine the potential drop across the capacitor. For that, let us consider the ACB path. For path ACB, we can write down the Kirchhoff law as VA. Next, this current I2 is passing along this direction, and we are also moving the path along this direction. The direction of the current and the direction of the path are in the same direction, so that minus I2 into 2. What is I2? I2 is equal to 1 ampere, 1 into 2, 2. Next, when we are moving from C to B, here also the direction of the current and the direction of the path are same, so that minus I1 plus I2 is equal to 3. 3 into 2 is equal to minus 6. That must be equal to the potential at the end point of the path VB. From this we can write VA minus VB is equal to 8 volts. That's why the potential difference between the 2 points along the ACB path is equal to 8 volts, which is same across the ADB path. There is no current passing through this resistor. That's why the potential drop across this ACB path is equal to the potential drop across the capacitor, so that the potential drop across the capacitor is given by 8 volts. Okay, remember, while solving the circuit, whenever there is a capacitor in the DC circuits, after fully charging, no current is passing through the capacitor, and that part of the circuit can be removed while solving the problem. Come to the next one. A light ray enters a solid glass sphere of refractive index mu is equal to root 3 at an angle of incidence 60 degrees. The ray is both reflected and refracted at the farther surface of the sphere. The angle in degrees between the reflected and refracted rays at this surface is dash. Suppose, let us take this as the given solid glass sphere. Let O is the center of the sphere. The light ray enters along this direction and it meets the surface at point A. This ON1 say is the normal to the surface, and this angle of incidence is given as 60 degrees. This is air for which the refractive index mu is equal to 1. This is the glass sphere for which the refractive index is given as root 3. Now you know that whenever the light ray travels from one medium to the another medium, it refracts, and let us assume that this angle is theta. And at this point B, the light ray meets the second side of the sphere and it emerges out along this path and also reflected along this path. That means at that point B, it is partly reflected and partly refracted. Now in this problem we want to determine the angle alpha between the refracted ray and the reflected ray. For that, let us assume that R is the angle of the emergence at the point B. Now I am going to apply the Snell's law at point A and at point B to determine the unknown angles. What is Snell's law? From Snell's law we can write mu1 sin I is equal to mu2 sin R. Here mu1, mu2 are the refractive indices of the two mediums, and IR are the angle of incidence and the angle of the refraction for the light ray. Now by applying at point A, what can we get? At A, what is mu1? It is traveling from air to the medium. That's why 1 into sine 60 is equal to, it enters into the glass medium for which the refractive index is equal to root 3. So root 3 sine, this angle is theta, so sine theta. So from this we can write sine theta is equal to 1 by 2. It implies theta is equal to 30 degrees. Now let us see the diagram. If this is the radius of the sphere, this is also the radius of the sphere. Now when you consider the triangle AOB, these two sides are equal. That's why these two angles are also equal. That's why this is theta, this is also theta. Now this ON2 is the normal at the second surface. Now again let us apply the Snell's law at point B for the refraction. So at B, what can we write? At B again mu1 sin I is equal to mu2 sin R. Here the light ray travels from the glass to the air. That's why root 3 sin theta is equal to 1 into sin R. By substituting theta is equal to 30 degrees, it becomes root 3 sin 30 is equal to sin R. From this we get it as R is equal to 60 degrees. Okay, this is 60 degrees. And at point B, the light ray is also reflected. According to the laws of the reflection, the angle of incidence and the angle of the reflection are equal. That's why if this angle is theta, this angle is also equal to theta. Now, along the line N2BO, if suppose we write down the angles, the sum of the angles R plus alpha plus theta must be equal to 180 degrees at this point B. R is known for us, theta is known for us. Substitute their values and find out the alpha value. R is 60 degrees plus alpha plus 30 is equal to 180 degrees. From this we can write alpha is equal to 90 degrees. So we have to express the value in degrees so that the angle between the reflected ray and the refracted ray at the second surface is alpha is equal to 90. So your answer is 90. Come to the next problem. A particle of mass m is moving along the x-axis with initial velocity u I cap. It collides elastically with a particle of mass 10m at rest and then moves with half of its initial kinetic energy. If sin theta 1 is equal to root n sin theta 2, then the value of n is dash. Okay, this is the first particle. The mass of the first particle is given as m1 is equal to m. It is moving with velocity u along the positive x-axis. It hits the second particle of mass m2 is equal to 10m, which is initially at rest. Now, elastic collision is taking place. After that, the particle of mass m is moving along this direction and particle of mass 10m is moving along this direction by making angles theta 1 and theta 2 with the original direction of the motion. Let v1 is the velocity of the first particle and v2 is the velocity of the second particle after collision. Now here, in this problem it is given that the collision is elastic collision and during the collision the energy is transformed between the bodies and the final KE of first body is equal to half of the initial KE of the first one. So we can write it as half m v1 square is equal to half into half m u square. So half m cancelled and from this we have v1 is equal to u by root 2. This is equation number 1. If suppose the first body retains half of its energy, then what happened to the remaining half of the energy? In this elastic collision there is no loss of energy. That's why if first body loses some energy, then that energy must be transferred to the second body. That's why the final kinetic energy of the second one is equal to half of the initial kinetic energy of the first one. That means half is retained within the first body, half is transferred to the second body, so that we can write it as a half into 10m V2 square is equal to half into half m u square. Okay, now this half of cancelled, and from this we have V2 is equal to u by root 20, let it be equation number 2. Now in case of the any collision, the total momentum is conserved in any direction. Along this vertical direction, there is no initial momentum for the system. That's why the total momentum of the system in this vertical direction after the collision must also be equal to 0. For that, the component of the velocity along this direction is given by v1 sin theta 1, and for this the component is given by v2 sin theta 2. So along this vertical direction also the total momentum must be conserved. From this we can write it as m v1 sin theta 1 is equal to 10m v2 sin theta 2. So cancelled, substitute v1 v2 values, it becomes u by root 2 sin theta 1 is equal to 10 times u by root 20 sin theta 2. So we can write it as sin theta 1 is equal to root 10 sin theta 2. So root 2 cancel in this for root 10 times, cancel 10 times, so that we have sin theta 1 is equal to root 10 sin theta 2, but it is given that sin theta 1 is equal to root n sin theta 2. By comparing this we have root n is equal to root 10, from that we have n is equal to 10, so your answer is n is equal to 10. Now come to the next problem. A square shaped hole of side L is equal to a by 2. L is equal to a by 2 is carved out at a distance of d is equal to a by 2 from the center O of a uniform circular disk of radius a. If the distance of the center of the mass of the remaining portion from O is minus a by x, the value of x to the nearest integer is dash. Here we have a circular shaped plate. In that circular shaped plate, a square plate is removed. Whenever the square plate is removed from the circular plate, automatically the center of mass of the remaining system will be shifted towards the left side. Here, a part of the plate in the right side is removed, so that the center of mass must be moving to the left side. In this case, the shift in the center of mass can be calculated by following certain procedure. Here, for the square plate, the area of the for this square plate, let us assume that the density, the surface density is sigma. Let us assume that sigma is the surface mass density, which is nothing but mass per unit area. Now, by knowing the surface mass density, the mass of the circular plate can be determined by the formula m1 is equal to sigma into a, that is equal to sigma into pi a square. Let it be equation number 1. Now the removed portion is in the form of a square of side a by 2. That's why the mass of the removed portion m2 is equal to sigma a that is equal to sigma into a by 2 whole square, that is equal to sigma a square by 4. Let it be equation number 2. Now let us assume the origin of the coordinate system at point O. Here the distance of the center of mass of the original plate is located at its center according to the geometry, so that the distance from the origin is equal to 0, and x2 is the distance of the center of mass of the removed portion. The distance of the center of mass of the removed portion is equal to a by 2, that is given. So m1 is known, m2 is known, x1 is known, x2 is known. Then we want to determine the distance of the center of mass. In case of the removing, the distance of the center of mass is given by m1 x1 minus m2 x2 divided by m1 minus m2. So by substituting the values, it becomes xcm is equal to 0 minus sigma a square by 4 into a by 2 divided by sigma pi a square minus sigma a power a square by 4. By simplifying this, you will get it as xcm is equal to sigma will be cancelled, a square is also cancelled, and by substituting the pi value and by making the simplifications, we get it as xcm is equal to minus 23.12. But here we want to find out the nearest integer value. That nearest integer value is equal to 23. So your answer is 23. So the next and last problem. A wire of density 9 into 10 to the power of minus 3 kg centimeter minus 3 is stretched between the two clamps 1 meter apart. The resulting strain in the wire is 4.9 into 10 to the power of minus 4. The lowest frequency of the transverse vibrations in the wire is dash. The Young's modulus is given, and we want to find out the lowest frequency of the transverse vibrations, which is nothing but the fundamental frequency. For that, let us see the setup. Here between the two edges, a wire of length L is equal to 1 meter is supported, and a load is attached. As a result of that, some tension is developed inside the string. If suppose we note down the data, the data is the density rho is equal to 9 into 10 to the power of minus 3 kg centimeter minus 3, which is equal to 9 into 10 to the power of 3 kg meter minus 3. That means centimeter to the power of minus 3 here is changed as meter to the power of minus 3. The length of the wire is given as 1 meter. The strain is given as 4.9 into 10 to the power of minus 4. The Young's modulus is given, and we want to determine the fundamental frequency value. We know that the fundamental frequency n is equal to 1 by 2L into square root of T by mu. Here mu is equal to mass per 1 unit length, which is equal to volume into density divided by L, which is equal to AL rho by L. This is equal to A rho. By substituting in this equation, it becomes 1 by 2L into root of T by A rho. This is equal to 1 by 2L into square root of stress by rho. Already we know that the Young's modulus Y is equal to stress by strain. In the problem, strain is given for us, Y is given for us. From this we can write stress is equal to Y into strain. So by substituting in this equation, it becomes N is equal to 1 by 2L into square root of Y into strain divided by rho. L is given, Y is given, strain is given, and rho is also given. This is equal to 1 by 2 into 1 root of the Young's modulus is 9 into 10 to the power of 10 into the strain is equal to 4.9 into 10 to the power of minus 4 divided by the density of the wire is equal to 9 into 10 to the power of 3. So by simplifying that, you get it as N is equal to 35 hertz. So the frequency is N is equal to 35. Okay. So I think you understand the problems, and also you recall the formulas while I am explaining the problems. We will meet again in the next session. Thank you one and all.